A few weeks ago, I was helping a friend with the relocation of his shed as he was moving house. While I was there, he asked me if I could restore some pieces of old timber that he had and make them into shelves for his kitchen. As the timber was in poor condition, some resin would be required. The project involved several pours, and on one of those pieces I was unable to release all of the air from the resin, so I decided that I needed a vacuum tank to degas the resin prior to continuing the project. This started as a side project but became too large to show inside the main project, and it became a project in its own right. I needed to put the restoration project on hold until after I've completed this build. G'day, I'm Stevo and welcome to the Outback Shed. I bought this vacuum pump a little over a year ago. It was an opportunistic buy, but it was always intended to be used for this purpose. I've had this project planned for some time, but it never was a priority, and there was always something else more important to be done. That is, until now. This is a two-stage pump and has a capacity of 6 cubic feet per minute, which should be more than adequate for the job. It comes with a power cord and a bottle of oil. I sourced a gauge for the top of the tank and a hose to connect to the system. For the tank, I found a large pan in the kitchen that had never been used. After some negotiation, I received permission to repurpose it to the shed. It measures 270 by 220, so it should be large enough to handle most of the pours that I'd want to make. I have a sheet of 12mm polycarbonate that I'll use for the top. With the parts laid out, we can see the configuration of the system. There's nothing complicated about it. The brass fittings to the connectors came from parts I already have, with a central block and a few minor bits purchased locally for just a few dollars. I got a piece of silicone 5mm thick, and I just need to cut a hole in the middle to use that as a seal for the top. I borrowed a bowl from the kitchen to use as a guide to cut the hole. After centralising on the sheet, I used an X-Acto knife to cut the hole. The tank will connect to the pump and have two isolation valves, one between the pump and the tank and the other to allow for initial pass-through of air and then to seal the system from the outside atmosphere. It also has a filter installed to allow it to be used to bleed air back into the system at the end of the degas cycle. The gauge will sit on top of the tank and be mounted between the two valves. This will register the amount of vacuum in the tank. The connector must be screwed into the polycarbonate sheet. The thread on the connector is 3/8 BSP and it's a parallel thread, not a taper thread. There are two types of BSP threads, parallel and taper. The test nut runs all the way up the threads on the parallel tap, but not on the taper tap. The nut starts loose and then tightens up as it runs up the body and then locks before it gets to the end of the thread. On the taper tap, the lead-in is a smaller diameter than that of the parallel tap and larger than the parallel tap at the end of the body. A close look at the taps shows the differences. Referring to the tap tables, we can see that the 3/8 inch taper tap has 19 threads per inch with a tap drill of 14.75mm. or 14.5 if using a reamer. It also has a taper of 1 to 16. The 3/8 parallel thread again has 19 TPI, but the tap drill is 15.3, which I don't have, but I still do need a parallel thread. I was planning to drill and tap this hole in the drill press, but since this is polycarbonate and prone to chipping, I'll set it up on the mill table on a pair of large aluminium parallels, which I'll set close together to provide the support needed for the sheet. After using a centre drill, I'll tighten the camera mount before running a pilot hole and finishing with a 14.5 drill. The hole is too small to start the parallel tap, but there's a trick to get around this. Call it a hack if you like. We can use the taper tap to start the thread, but not go too deep. This forms a good lead in for the parallel tap, which will then take the thread to its final size. It's important that the parallel tap cuts the entirety of the thread. To avoid the possibility of an oversized thread at the very top, it's important not to go too deep with the taper tap. This hack works fine with all sizes of BSP threads. It's important to use a tap follow to ensure that the thread doesn't wander off angle. The seal in the connector needs to have even pressure around its periphery. It's time to assemble the parts. I've used Teflon tape on all of the joints except the bottom thread that screws into the top. All of the parts have been tightened except the bottom connector, which I've left just finger tight. This way, when I screw the parts into the top, both of these threads will tighten evenly, giving a better feel for tightness and the ability to have the dial facing in the desired direction. Now that's done, we can fill the pump with oil. After a short startup to ensure the pump works, we can do a test run of the tank. I haven't taken it to full vacuum on the first run, but after 15 seconds the result is impressive. Now to get back to the restoration project and try it out. This is a small pour with a mixed ratio of 2 to 1. I gave the resin a good mix, mostly off camera. I thought I would spare you that. The tank held vacuum well. None was lost since the initial test. Full vacuum was achieved in 21 seconds. Again, very impressive. After a 15-minute period, I'll bleed the air out slowly. That worked well. I flamed the remaining bubbles off the surface with a small gas torch and we're good to pour. Well, what started as a side project quickly grew into something much bigger. So much so that the main project had to be put on hold for a few days while I sourced some parts and completed the build. It's something I've been meaning to do for some time now, just never had the need to bring it up the batting order. All I need to do now is put a logo on it and the project is complete. The system works better than I expected and has a nice finish. Expect to see this used in future projects. Now, back to the restoration project. As always, thanks for watching. If you liked the video and enjoyed the build, please consider subscribing and give me the thumbs up. Also, leave a comment if you like. I do read all the comments and reply where I can. Be productive, be creative, but most importantly, be safe in your shed. Catch you next time.